Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the meeting of the Governance Audit and Audit Committee of Breckland Council. We have a number of guests with us today. We have Councillor Jane James, the Cabinet Member, so very welcome, a number of officers, and we have Councillor Burt, who's a councillor but not on the committee. Item 1 on our agendas is minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of July 2022. Do we have any comments for accuracy only on the minutes? We have a query on the minutes, Councillor Burt.
I do. On page 15, there appears to be some debris left over, and I just wanted clarification that there isn't any text missing. You'll see there's some variables, field names and things.
Julie, do you have any comments on that?
That's entirely my fault. That's a mistake. It's just the fields, titles and that on the last page. So there's no text missing.
So it's not material. So there's no amendment to make. Any other points from members? Lovely. Are you happy that I sign those minutes? It's a true and accurate record. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. So actions arising from the minutes specifically of that meeting. I don't have any members? No. Okay. So we come to item 3, apologies. Julie.
Thank you, Chairman. I have one apology from Councillor Monument.
I'm sorry to hear that she's not very well, so wish her well. So we come to item 4, urgent business, if any. I have received an email from Councillor Burt, and I propose to deal with that under this item. It's not technically urgent business, but it seems a good spot on the agenda to do it. So there were 2 issues that Councillor Burt raised. One was an inconsistency between the standing orders in the Constitution. So if we could start with that. Rob, do you want to pick this up, or Sarah, do you want to? Rob, yeah.
Chairman, I wondered if it'd be worth asking Councillor Burt to I don't know if his comments have been shared amongst the members of the committee.
He did share them at full council, but so they are in the public record. But if Councillor Burt would like, he can.
Well, I haven't come,
say them again.
Well, I haven't come prepared with the unless I search back through my notes through the points of order that I've raised over time. But basically, the issue is between, if I remember, standing orders 6, 7, and 8, where parts of them are saying that we're constraining the questions to 30 minutes, and other parts they're not saying that. I've raised a number of points of order, and they've all been addressed in various ways. But what it is picking up is that there are inconsistencies between those standing orders. There are bits which says one thing and one which says another.
I think that's a very succinct outline of the email you sent me. Rob.
Yeah, to pick up on a few bits. I've had a look back at the points of order over the last few council meetings to try and remind myself of the various issues that have been raised at various times. One was regarding, I think it's standing order 5, which is questioning of the minutes at council meetings, and I think has been acknowledged by the team that when we went into a hybrid situation, the questioning wasn't taken forward at full council meetings, but actually it is appropriate that there should be the opportunity to question minutes at full council meetings, and I think you'll have seen that reflected at the last meeting. So that process has been dealt with and tidied up as we've returned back to meetings in person rather than hybrid meetings.
Could I just, is that questioning on it?
No, you can question the minutes or any reports that are associated with the minutes. You can't go broader to discuss general topics. It has to be specifically relevant to something that was considered by that committee. So there is some discretion there, but I think ideally you can ask for clarification, you can ask for further information about topics that were discussed at a committee, but it has to be something specifically referenced in those minutes. But it is beyond just clarification, accuracy. It does go beyond that point. The other one that's a recurrent theme, as Councillor Burt knows for well, is regarding standing order 7, and it's At what point in the agenda questioning is permitted by members of the council at the council meeting? And there is a slight difference between full council here and other committees in that full council, we believe it's clear that all the questioning comes in the one item that is capped at a 30-minute question and an answer slot. That is, I think, and Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, specific to full council, and there are slightly different arrangements in for the other committees in the council, and that's perhaps some of the discrepancy that Councillor Burt's alluding to. But in our opinion, in my opinion, it is very clear in terms of full council, the questioning in terms of supplementary questions and questions of the leader, for example, and other cabinet members, all fall within that single slot that allows 30 minutes. Within that 30 minutes, there's an obligation to go to the leaders of the opposition parties first, and we will do that in order of size of the relevant opposition parties. And then it's essentially open to any other council member to ask questions. So I don't believe that's been inconsistently implemented. Councillor Burt might like to say that he'd like the wording tight. I don't want to speak for you, Councillor Burt, but I think it's been consistently implemented, and the intention is clear in the Constitution. Councillor Burt may disagree with that view, but I think that's for him. So I don't think there has been any consistency in terms of 5 and 7. I think it's clear, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Burt, do you just want to come back on that?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I do. I'm not contesting that actually it's not being consistently applied. It's more that the words within the Constitution are inconsistent across those standing orders. It's not crystal clear as to which one takes priority. I know that has now been determined, but I think it would be better for us to review those elements of the Constitution, those particular standing orders, and perhaps tighten up the wording so that it is crystal clear.
Well, I tell you what we'll do then is, because we do have periodic reviews of the Constitution, if it's being implemented consistently at the moment, I don't propose that we take a special meeting, because it sounds to me like it is being managed. But the next time that we have a review of the bits and pieces of the Constitution, which we, as I say, do automatically, then we'll just include that. And if you come back and say, actually, in our advice, the wording is fine as it is, then obviously the committee will consider it. But if you propose an amendment, we'll consider it. But taking on board Councillor Burt's point. And if I turn to you, Sarah, because the second point that Councillor Burt raised to me in writing was about the implementation of the new standards regime. So if I could turn to you for that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So officers have reviewed and compared our current standards regime, in particular with the LGA Model Code of Conduct. We've made some recommendations and are currently in discussions with our cabinet member, Councillor Jane James, and a recommendation will be coming forward in due course. It is our intention that if the Code of Conduct is going to change, that it would change from May, to provide consistency. Otherwise we'll have sort of a bit of mix and match for new and old members. So the intention is, if we do amend it and update it, that it will be from May next year.
Lovely, thank you very much. Okay, members. Sorry, Councillor Kybird.
Would that involve a change to standing orders? And if so, it would need to stand for one full council period to take effect at the ensuing one.
I don't think it will involve a change to the standing orders, because the Code of Conduct is attached as a document and a process at the end of the Constitution. The previous arrangements were agreed by council in any event, so the intention would be that it would come here first and then go off to council for approval.
Thank you. I now propose to Councillor Burt.
Can I just sort of clarify the reason why that came about? I mean, basically the focus I had was on the, it's on page 179, if anybody wants to look it up. It's the clause which in the Nolan Principles about honesty, which has significantly changed. This is a very out of date piece of text, which I think came back from the very original meeting of the, which Nolan presented this, but this was reviewed in 2014, I believe. And the clause under honesty just says that you should be truthful, and that's not what it says in our constitution. So that's a key focus point.
Well, I'm sure that all the members are entirely honest and truthful, Councillor Burt, and obviously that's part of the reason for the review. So thank you for your interest there. Okay, if we move on to item 5, declarations of interests. Do members have any declarations of interest which they haven't previously declared or wish to declare at this meeting in relevance to any of the points we're discussing? No, lovely. Item 6, we've already introduced the members in attendance. So we go straight to item 7, training item. So any comments on training? We did have some training. Faye.
I just want to say thank you to everybody that did attend, and if further training is needed for members that were unable to make that session, I'm more than happy to arrange another date, and hopefully the training provided was useful and gave some insight into the work of the committee.
Thank you very much. I mean, obviously we have a new committee in May next year, so I think we'll have to start again with the new committee, because who knows which of us will be here after May. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, just to pick up on the training, I did take part in the training, and it was very clear and easy, understandable. Obviously, I'm slightly biased because having been on the committee some time, and my background is audit and governance, amongst other things, and internal audit. But it's very clear, and I hope that gives a better understanding to all members of the council, you know, and obviously not just new members of this committee. Thank you.
Ringing endorsement there from Councillor Clark. Brilliant. Okay, anything else on training that members wish to discuss? No? Okay, so we move on to item 8, the Q2 risk report on page 16 of your agendas. And we have the cabinet member here. Is there anything you wish to say as introduction, Councillor James?
That's easier. So yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm delighted to bring the Q2 risk report to the committee today. Currently, the number of strategic risks identified by the council is 12, and this is an increase of 1 since the report was last brought to the committee. Ryan will go into more detail on this in a minute, but I did just want to draw members' awareness to the dates of some of these items before discussion. As you will see, both the medium-term financial plan and emerging policy risks were written at the beginning of the month during a time of national transition. As a result of recent announcements, these risks may change in the near future as greater information is announced at a national level. The risk register is next due to be seen by yourselves at your next meeting, which I understand is currently in 2023, and Ryan will outline some of the options that you guys might wish to consider. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Ryan, do you want to come in now?
Yeah, I'll just come in on a couple of points for some of the changes to the register. So the new risk is in relation to temporary accommodation. I think we've sort of discussed in here previously under the other housing risk about what some of those elements are. Obviously, I'm happy to welcome suggestions in terms of how you guys would like us to see us move that forward in terms of mitigations. The other slightly new risk in there is around housing demand. So previously that was quite narrow and just related to the introduction of the Homelessness Reduction Act. What we've done subsequently is we've expanded that to include cost of living, long-term impacts of COVID on housing within the district. So that's sort of essentially been expanded. The GDPR risk is still on there. Obviously at the last meeting, you'll be aware that some decisions were made in relation to that and planning comments. The reason that's still on there is because I need to check the evidence of that to make sure that we've successfully mitigated that. As a result of that, if that goes through, what we'll look to do is merge that into the cyber risk, just because there's quite a lot of crossover between the two areas. And then this is probably going to be an item which we'll discuss in the work programme at the end, but we're next due here in February 2023 to bring the Q3 risk report. It might make sense for us to do the Q3 and the Q4 report at the same time at that meeting. It's just whether there is a preference for having 2 reports or just bringing 1 risk report, which looks at both of them. But I'll leave that item to the work programme. I just want to raise that now. Obviously, in terms of this risk register, I have to take any questions from the committee that they might have.
Members, over to you, Robert, and then Harry.
Yes, thank you, Ryan. On the rising temporary accommodation, one of the risk factors is the cost of temporary accommodation. To what extent is that offset by government support?
I think Rob might be a better place to answer this one than me.
In simple terms, and I won't get into specific numbers, the level of the housing rebate you can return is higher if the property you're using is in your ownership. If it's not in your ownership, the level of rebate that can be returned is less. So you'll have noticed the council agenda went out yesterday with a report specifically about this topic, which is looking proposing that the council acquire some properties for the use of temporary accommodation. There are many reasons to do that. One of them social and about the quality of the accommodation, but there also is a financial imperative to do that because the benefits we receive as the owner of those properties are higher, and therefore it offsets the cost of the accommodation. So yes, rebate is affected if you're using private supply versus your own.
So I've got Harry and then David.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks for that brief introduction, Christine and Ryan. You referred to recent transitions. Obviously, this is populated, some of the information, the new risk via the corporate management team, and obviously taking account of the training, which I paid attention to very closely recently. Obviously, it's not necessarily for us to give a specific direction to the corporate management team. One can make a comment, but it doesn't have to be taken notice of. I just noted recently, and this is partly in relation to things like financial liquidity, etc. The district council's network is recently expressing concern at sort of national, international, events. And there's no suggestion of any issues about business continuity, certainly for this, for this council. But there are some things in there that they've referred to, things like leisure centres and potential declining in revenue, spending reviews, and so forth. Now that's obviously up to the corporate management team to come back, and if there was anything that needed to be reviewed, that may well come to scrutiny, looking back at your training as opposed to coming back to here. I'm not suggesting we need to have another meeting of this, an extraordinary meeting of this group before then, because it's more appropriate for scrutiny and and full council rather than here. But it's really just sort of flagging that up, that I'm assuming by Christine that that's what the corporate management team would be keeping an eye on, all those lights, whether they're going red, green or amber, that we haven't got already. Thank you.
Yes, no, absolutely.
Maybe as a member of the corporate management team, I'm best placed to answer. At Cabinet on Monday, there was a report on the latest quarter's financial position, which went through some of the very topics you discussed, Councillor Clark, in terms of variances against the budget because of the emerging situation Councillor James has described. It covered things such as inflationary changes on our contracts and other such matters like that. So yes, we do regularly monitor. Yes, there have been significant changes, and we've had to reflect and react to those within year. In terms of reporting mechanism, we report on a quarterly basis, as you're aware, to Cabinet, and obviously scrutiny, as they see fit, could call in the item for further discussion. But I can reassure you all that all the topics and items you discussed are under constant review, and it is a challenging and difficult financial position for us, as it is for many councils. But I think we outlined at Cabinet on Monday how we've managed to get to a balanced position for this year.
David.
Thanks, Chair. The first is a bit picky. Page 18, paragraph 5.8, under implications. It's the opinion that there are no health and well-being implications, but the first two risks clearly state that there are health and well-being implications. Yeah, I've got a few. Which have you?
I'm happy to go along one at a time if that's easier, because we're quite informal. So
Yeah, so the reason it says about that is because there's no health and wellbeing implications specifically of this report, because it's for the committee to know. So there's no decision to make, which is why it says that.
I think Councillor picked up before on the temporary accommodation usage risk. We've got a bullet point there saying the potential large cost to the council, but that's not quantified in any sense. And it'd be helpful at some point to understand what that actually is. You know, what's large.
Yeah, so I'm happy to go away and moving forward for when we bring this back in February, quantify both the spend and what is being offset in terms of that rebate. I'd have to check with housing whether that is something we're happy to do sort of in the public committee, or whether we need to discuss that offline. But I'm happy to have that conversation because that is something which is going to be useful for judging this risk.
Rob, I think is going to come in.
Yeah, we are able to provide that information, and we can provide the budgeted breakdown, because clearly it's something we're monitoring on a weekly basis. If we took no intervention, the financial risk would be in excess of £500,000 within the year over budget. But as I've alluded to earlier, there is a report going to council as a series of mitigations to bring that level of financial exposure down.
David, back to you.
Yeah, sorry, we're on page 24, which is the leisure centre risk. I think we had this at the last session where it says if visitor levels do not recover to pre-COVID levels, and it's just to sort of get an idea what timescale might be put on that. You know, are we sort of saying after 12 months or after 2 years, and then we can get a better understanding as to what the risk, what risk might be quantified.
So the leisure ones are a slightly interesting one at the moment, just because, so in terms of those visitor levels, we report that in the performance report, and they are sort of pre-COVID levels at the moment. We have a COVID recovery plan. With this risk specifically, to be entirely honest, we need to see how the winter goes in terms of how that impacts participation levels, and if anything, you know, illness-wise, shall we say, happens or impacts them again. I'd be hopeful that by the time we get to probably April next year, we can sit down, look at a full year and go, are we happy that this risk is beginning to be mitigated again? So then we're happy that it's more of an operational issue. The only other point which we'll just pick up on the leisure risk, because Councillor Clark raised it as well, we will potentially be introducing another risk around energy costs for leisure centres. But I just need to do some further work on that first to understand that before we work out what level that's going to sit at. But yeah, so essentially participation levels are realistically, off the top of my head, at sort of pre-COVID levels. We're pretty happy with how they are. We have a COVID recovery plan. I'd be hoping that this is a risk which we could look to bring to an operational level within the next few months, but we need to see how winter goes first before we make that decision.
Just coming in on that, because that was a query that I had as well, in that if they are back to pre-COVID levels, you know, what has happened? Do we normally see a dip in winter, or are we expecting this winter to be different from previous winters?
So I think there's normally a bit of I think it dips a bit in the summer because people obviously have the option to go outside, and then it rises again slightly in the autumn and the winter. Essentially with this, because, you know, this is going to be another winter where, whilst I don't know if we're going to have any variants or anything like that, I wouldn't want to get rid of this risk before we get through the winter, just in case we have to reintroduce it if we do see sort of longer term impacts.
Okay. And Rob, you want to come in?
Yeah, just in terms of a few general observations, and I'll come back to the winter point. Interestingly, swimming is exceeding pre-COVID levels. Swimming uptake was quick and higher than it had been at previous levels. Now, there may be a degree of that of school children catching up on lessons that have been missed, but actually, and that was a nationwide response, not just within our operation. And the feedback we're getting from our contractor is that the bounce back has been quicker than expected. So hopefully this can be reflected in the risk measures moving forward. In terms of winter, one of the key measures, if you look at income at the leisure centre rather than participation, one of the key drivers around income is direct debits. Direct debits tend to peak in the first couple of weeks in January as people consider their life choices after a heavy Christmas lunch and such like. So not looking at participation per se, but in terms of income, which is an important driver in a contractual arrangement, actually, the first weeks in January are key times for the leisure provider where they have to capitalise on the demand within the system. So it's not the latter half of the winter where you see a decline in participation. Actually, you're seeing an increase in uptake.
Lovely, thanks very much. David, back to you.
We're on page 26 of the local plan. And this might be just that events have caught up, but in the latest note section at the bottom there, it says there's been no changes to this risk. But I understand there was a report to Cabinet recently, which has resulted in an extension to the consultation stage. And it does reference that it isn't clear that the planning inspectorate would accept those changes. So it just.
Okay, I think we're going to go straight back to Rob on that one. Good turn.
Chairman, you may not wish to invite me again.
No, I think.
In terms of essentially, yeah, we're running a second period of consultation because we had feedback during the first phase of consultation that we then took further advice on. And the advice from the planning inspector and subsequently from council was to run a second period of consultation. In fundamental terms, it's allowing a 2-week delay, and we're still planning to hit our November cabinet meeting for sign off of both consultation results and therefore sign off for submission to the inspectorate. So in terms of timeline, it's a case of a fortnight. In terms of the risks regarding the planning inspectorate, we've taken council advice on this changing course of action. The council advice is very strong and very clear. It's reflective of the feedback we've had from the planning inspectorate, and we think it mitigates the issues that have been raised to date. So we think that risk is mitigated.
And again, I mean, in the table on page 26 at the bottom there, it says it implies that the call for sites process has been completed. And I understand that's now been extended to December.
Chairman, it is quite correct. The call for sites has been extended to December. There's a couple of reasons for this. One of the main reasons is there were a number of areas where we received no submissions on call for sites. One of those is regarding future Gypsy and Travellers sites. So again, it's not impacting on the timeline because it's not pushing back the work that's needed in any way. So we've taken the opportunity to open the opportunity to make submissions for a further period of time in the hope that we will address some of those areas where we didn't have submissions. And I can reassure you it didn't have any impact on the timeline of the process moving forward.
The final one is page 31, which is the GDPR. And I think Ryan might have alluded to it earlier, but it says there, stop displaying third party in the action plan comments on the Breckland website, which is not what we agreed at the last governance and audit meeting.
Yeah, so essentially with this one, this risk update came in August. So that's why it has been updated with that. As I said, I need to check that. My hope is that it has been done. And then what we can do is merge that with the cybersecurity risk. But thanks. Yeah, that isn't clear in the report, given what was done in light of last meeting.
Thank you. I've got Robert again, and then Tim.
Thank you, Chairman.
Tim, sorry.
On the nutrient neutrality risk, we see we've got a target date of April next year to get that down to into the green zone, but presumably if a suitable schemes of mitigation have not been identified by then, the likelihood of the impact will then go up because it will have a potential effect on the 5-year housing supply. So unless government legislation changes.
Yes, the nutrient neutrality risk, we're currently waiting on some stuff from Natural England with regards to their mitigation list before we can move that forward. So without that, we are a little bit stuck. I think we will review this as time goes on if those mitigations aren't out as to whether this will have an impact on the local plan. We need to merge that back into the local plan risk. I think the discussions I've had with planning still are that, this is a hurdle rather than a brick wall. But I do appreciate your point that obviously we have set an April date and we can't move forward with it at the moment until we get that mitigation list from Natural England.
It is, obviously, we are in the hands of external powers rather than Breckland, so.
Absolutely, but I understand the most recent meeting on neutrality, Natural England didn't even send a representative, so how they expect to move things forward, I don't know.
I'm not surprised by that, but I am disappointed. So we'll see. I mean, I think what Ryan says stands, but I agree with you, Councillor Kybert. It's not an ideal situation, and the whole thing with neutrality wasn't at all. Arrived unheralded and unprepared for. Yeah. So anyway, we've got Councillor Burt now.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got sort of one general point and a couple of specific ones, but perhaps before I just mention about the issue on the local plan about Regulation 18, which I did go and have a read of yesterday, and it seems odd that we are still progressing the way that we are when Regulation 18 is calling for ideas on what the plan should include. So until we have completed the Regulation 18, we can't go on to 19. So it seems a little indeterminate, but perhaps I can pick that one up with Rob outside of the meeting. Specifically then, so the general point I had, this is coming back to the corporate peer challenge report that we had at Cabinet. There is a thread that's running through that, which is talking about finance. Specifically, it's noted in the recommendations 1 and 2 about how we will fund our aspirations. And I know that we put finance in particular risks from time to time, but I wondered whether there's any merit in having a general risk about finance within this report.
Well, the risks are fed to us by, it's not been a request from the committee. We have got financial risks covered in this. So at the moment, I'm not proposing that we embark on a further risk. Unless the committee disagree with me, and I haven't seen anybody suggesting that we should.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Specifically, a couple of points then. Page 25, the sustainability strategy. Nothing much appears to have changed from last time, but again, I will point out that the Corporate Peer Challenge recommendation 5 raises concerns about ownership and delivery of this project. Now, last time I mentioned, I queried why we were classifying technology availability as an intrinsic problem when all of the technology, so far as I can see, is available. So my question really is, what technology are we looking for to be able to progress? Why is certain technology not available?
So, Councillor Burt, are you proposing that we should move the risk? Because if you are, then let's hear about that.
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to get into a deep discussion into the policy around this. It's a question of, is this the risk at the right level? And if it is not, then we can feed that back to the corporate management team.
I'm suggesting that as time has progressed and we haven't actually developed this further, or we're not aware that it's been developed further, that the risk is increasing. So my query is that we've stuck it right in the middle of the chart for a long time, but we haven't moved forward. And yet certain other things are picking up, like the Corporate Peer Challenge. It's saying, hey, up, this risk might be increasing. And that's my query.
Okay, so we can feed that back to Ryan for him to address your thoughts. Have you got anything else that you want to add?
Well, I've got one more, which is on page 27. So the current score on, this is critical breach of ICT. The current score is 4 times 3, but the target score is 5 times 1. And that just looks weird to me. How come we are targeting an increase in likelihood than where we are now? And I seriously question whether anybody can think that we can reduce the impact of a breach to 1. Anybody thinks that's possible really should just have read the news today about that Australian company, Optus. These things do have very high impact. So I don't understand how we're going backwards on 1 and how our target is to have a 1 in terms of impact.
Okay, well, there's one for Ryan. Do you want to pick up that second point?
Yeah, I'll pick that up. It's a fair point. I'm happy to look into that and reassess that and bring that back to the committee, because I do agree with your point, Councillor Burt. So I can bring that back with the working that we get behind that risk score.
Any other members? No? Point of information from the Vice Chairman. Can you turn your microphone on, please?
Sorry, Chairman, on page 25 on sustainability, it says we've allocated £525 from reserves. I think that should be thousands.
Okay, we got the decimal point. So it's £500,000, not. Okay, thank you for that point of information, Robert. Okay, well, we've noted it and questioned it. Members happy that we move on to the next item? I'm actually going to take the standards arrangements next, and then the internal audit, if that's okay with members. So item 10, annual report on standards arrangements, page 50. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you. So the
Close.
oh, close up, sorry. I usually get told not to move it. The delegation for the standards regime sits with the Governance and Audit Committee, and it was agreed that we would give the Governance and Audit an annual update on standards complaints. And this is that update, which is for the period the 1st of April 2021 to the 31st of March 2022. The current arrangements were proposed and agreed by members on the 6th of April 2017, and we've obviously covered earlier this morning about a potential review. And Bob Davis is our independent person, and he was appointed on the 16th of May 2019, and his appointment will come to an end in May 2023. In terms of the figures for the current period, we had 29 complaints, of which 3 were carried over from the previous year. So that's actually 26 new complaints. The figure of 8, which comes under the complaint, does not relate to a breach of code of conduct. That relates to such matters if we get a complaint that is actually against the parish council, or the person or the individual who's being complained about at the time, the subject member was not a councillor at the time of the complaint, or it doesn't relate to councillor business or the councillor's role as a councillor, or doesn't come within the code of conduct, then basically we will reject the complaint. So that is saying that we've had 8 of those during that period. Obviously, if we reject them, the matter doesn't then get taken forward. Of the complaints that we have considered, there have therefore been 18, and I did some calculations yesterday, and actually the split between parish councillors and district councillors is around 60% for parish and 40% for district for that period. Of those 18 complaints, we held in discussion with the independent person that there wasn't any breaches, and our percentage rate, because this again was something that the Governance and Audit Committee asked us to look at, it was the speed of which we deal with the complaints. The percentage of complaints completed within 3 months was 73% for that period.
Lovely, thank you very much. Members of the committee, any comments? All I would say, oh, Robert Kybert.
Will the revised code of conduct have any implication on the complaints procedure?
I suppose only time will tell.
It's up to full council, so what
Yeah,
they
it's up to-
decide. So it's
yeah.
not in the officer's gift. So
I suppose a potential difference between the model code and what we currently have is there's more flexibility about when a councillor is working on council business, and so therefore it could lead to an increase. But obviously that particular point may not be taken forward by council.
Councillor Burt.
It's an interesting set of statistics. I'm wondering why, when it is when the decision is that it doesn't merit further consideration, it takes such a long time to reach that conclusion, with more than a quarter of them going beyond 3 months. I want, what's the reason for the time delays there?
Councillor, you'll appreciate I didn't write the report, but I think actually the 73% figure should be, I think we need to put it in a different place, because that's to do with the overall complaints, including those that we didn't take forward and those that we did. Whereas this is suggesting it's just those that we didn't take forward.
But we didn't take any forward, did we? Because they were all dismissed as not meriting further consideration.
So when I say take forward, I mean that we didn't dismiss in the initial tranche, and we then did take forward, whilst we didn't formally investigate them because we didn't consider that there was a breach. There is still a process to adopt. We still have to consult with the independent person, obviously seek the subject members' views, and sometimes that does take time depending on the cooperation of the individuals concerned. And obviously we do our best, and we try and act as quickly as possible. But with the Westfield and the world, sometimes things are against us.
I mean, I will say it was part of the reason for the committee asking for the 3-month stat. And I am very heartened to see a dramatic increase from 1/3 to 3/4 of the number of assessments. Who knows what next year may bring. Are there any further queries on this paper? I think what are we're asked to note it. Members happy to note it? Duly noted. Thank you very much indeed, Sam. Okay, so we now go back to item 9 on our agendas, the internal audit progress and follow-up report, 1st of April 2022 to the 16th of September 2022, on page 37 of your agendas. And we have back with us Faye Hayward. Welcome, Faye. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to highlight, first of all, that the report looks a little different from the way you've received it in the past. So before, we've had 2 separate agenda items, one for progress and one for follow-up. And I think actually the agenda may flow a little better if we deal with internal audit in one section. So let me have the feedback once presented, but I'm hoping that we can take this format forwards. So the first half of the report covers progress. And in summary, 39 days of programme work have now been completed, and we are on track to deliver the plan currently. We have one final report to discuss today with an assurance grading of reasonable for GDPR. A total of 4 important recommendations have been raised, and we've also carried out a position statement on asset management. So we can go into the details of the findings in relation to that first of all, and then I think I'll take any questions and then move on to follow up thereafter. So at Appendix 2, we've got the reasonable assurance gradings for GDPR. And you may notice again that the layout of our reports has changed slightly. We're trying to give a much more succinct summary on a page for you, so you can see the high level points on page 43 for this piece of work. So we've highlighted that the security policy does make reference to the 1998 Data Protection Act, so that needs review. Secondly, around 84% of staff had completed the online refresher training, so we've raised the point about getting that up to 100%. Thirdly, the LGA member training for GDPR, we have no record currently of how many members have completed that. So adding in a piece of information to verify that everyone that should have completed it has would be very useful. And lastly, they're keeping information asset registers up to date. The last time we looked at this area, we highlighted that some had not been completed. This time we're saying they have been, but there's a couple that require review and they need to be brought up to date post-pandemic. So those are the high level points there for the GDPR work. And then for the position statement around asset management, we looked at operational assets, not commercial assets for this piece of work. And we covered things such as hostels, street lighting and roads. We haven't looked at this area before an internal audit. We've highlighted that there are some outstanding surveys that are a little overdue at the moment. So a programme of work needs to be pulled together to bring them up to date. And another key point is around recording that health and safety checks for hostels are formally recorded. We saw evidence that they were taking place, but just to formally report that we feel would be of benefit. So that's the audit work. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have on that work.
Thank you, Faye. Members, any questions or comments on the issues that Faye raises? Robert Kybert and then David. So I'm using your surname because, of course, we have the two Roberts sitting next door to each other.
Robert first.
Yes.
The LGA data protection training course, I think I was told at the time that our member development area, that the data wasn't available from the LGA on who'd taken the course. So I'm not sure how we're going to actually establish the outcome.
Yes, thank you. So the recommendation doesn't explicitly say how we should take that forward, but I think further work needs to be done to identify a mechanism for recording that. That may simply be surveying councillors and saying, have you or have you not completed it? But just to keep an eye on that, I think would be a benefit.
And obviously, we're going to have a new influx of members in May anyway, so we'll need to do, so that might be the perfect opportunity with the new council to refresh and record that. David.
On the appendix 4, we've got the final column which says pending verification. Just what's the time frame on that, and how do we know when it's been done and completed?
Sorry, David. So I'm just going to move on to follow up afterwards. So we would definitely handle that in the next section. Thank you.
Councillor Burt.
Just a comment. I think some of the training might have been picked up on the Hut 6 training that's gone through. Now, I don't know whether that's in sufficient detail to what you require, but I know that there's some feedback from Ben Mean on that one. So I think that, there might be something on which members have completed it. And just a small comment on mine, my agenda, it says error, bookmark not defined on page 37. That doesn't give me a lot of confidence.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is a template, and unfortunately, because I've added the follow-up in, the template has had a bit of a wobbly, so that's why you can see the error bookmark not found on that. I'll make sure it's rectified for the next time. Thank you.
Councillor Jones, you wanted to come in.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Burt, for picking up on that Hut 6 side of things, because it's something that I've been having a lot of conversations with the team on. So I believe at the last count, and obviously things have moved on since, we're sitting at about 33% in terms of people who have completed that training, but I'm mindful that it's not just the data protection, it is a global cyber security element that does pick up on some of that data protection stuff. So yes, Ben Mean is our ICT manager, as Councillor Burt mentioned, and he's fully aware of where people are, so that might be useful to feed into that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the committee on this report? Right, so we move on to progress.
Thank you, Chair. So we normally provide any details of outstanding audit recommendations that have been agreed and sadly haven't been able to be completed by their original deadline. So the start of that is on Appendix 3 at 47, and this gives you an overall representation of what we have outstanding at the time. And then on page 48 onwards, as is usually the case, we have some explanations in the right-hand column and a new revised due date if they've not been completed. Just to pick up on David's point here, we do have 4 that are mentioned as complete pending verification on the public sector housing report. That was a limited assurance report when we presented it in July. We haven't been able to go back in and verify the evidence in time for this report. And in any case, we do have an audit of that area coming up in Q3. So I think the best thing to do would be for us to go in and actually sit with the team, look through some cases and really independently verify that these risks are now closed down. But they have been reported to us as complete now, which I think is a positive. And yes, happy to take any questions on any of the queries. Thank you.
So on progress, any questions from the committee or comments? No? Lovely, thank you very much. We are asked to note that report. Thank you very much, Faye. I have to say, I think that is the quietest discussion of the internal audit that we've had. So congratulations on that. Okay, so that moves us on to item 11, the work programme. Now, I'm just going to go to, before we get into the thing, I just want to touch base with Julie, because there has been some confusion over the dates, including emails to being sent out. So Julie, if you'd just like to talk everybody through what our plan of meetings is going forward, so that members can make sure they've got the correct and definitive version in their diaries.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I must apologise for the automated emails that are going out to all members. It's to do with our mod.gov app, which we use, or programme that we use in committee services. And we are meeting with mod.gov this afternoon to try and sort that out, because every time we make a slight change to a meeting, it's automatically has been sending out automated emails to all members, which is quite confusing. But just to confirm the future meetings for the Governance and Audit Committee, we did postpone the 15th of December 2022 meeting and arranged another one for the 19th of January. However, since then, the 9th of February meeting, or the 8th of February meeting, has been brought forward to the 2nd of February. So there's no further meetings now of the Governance and Audit until the 2nd of February 2023.
So it was felt the 2 meetings were so close together that actually it would be more efficient use of members and officers' time to pull the 2 meetings together. And it's important that we have all the people that we need to the meetings able to attend. So that is the proposal. Are the committee happy to agree to that? And actually, if you look at the work programme, the dates are correct on that already. Members happy? Thank you. Okay, so let's just consider the work programme. Comments from members and officers on the work programme. Faye. Yeah, Julie's just turned it off. You're okay now, have you?
Sorry. Just quite heavy from the head of internal audit in February. So ordinarily we would have prepared the strategic and annual audit plan for the 23-24 around March time. So we're going to have to do our planning meetings a bit earlier as a result. But I'm wondering whether everybody's happy to receive, well, it will be 3 reports in there, or actually whether the self-assessment can move forward one, or I'm more than happy to continue with what we've got here, but it's quite a lot of work to get done.
So
probably after
the point
Christmas.
you made earlier on was about the 2 quarters. Do you want 2 reports for each of the quarters or just 1?
So that was for
that
risk
was risk, that wasn't
management.
you,
Yeah.
yes. I'd be happy, members, if you've got any comments on that. I mean, and do you have a preferred view? Because obviously we're not meeting again till the 2nd of February. So, and there is no further scope before May to do. So I think we will have to, and we're only moving the meeting forward from the 8th to the 2nd. So it's only 1 week earlier.
I think by combining the progress and follow-up, that should help things ever so slightly. So I'm more than happy to continue with it.
But we will need to take the annual one then anyway.
Yes, definitely. That one needs to come along.
Okay, Ryan, committee, how do you feel about the risk reports? Do you want to take 2 separate reports? I mean, the only thing I suppose about that is we will see the movement between the reports. So I'm tempted to say to have one report, but with both of the figures in it. So we'll take it as one, but it'll be interesting to see the movement between the various quarters, unless members want to do it any other way. No, okay. So I think we will do that. As, you know, especially if there's improvement or deterioration. So I think any other comments? It'll be a big meeting, so keep your diaries free.
So the risk reports are done on quarterly within the calendar year, and the finance reports are done quarterly within the financial year. Is that correct?
Risk is also done on a financial year. So we'd be bringing Q3, which runs from October to December, and Q4, which would be the middle of Q4, we'd be bringing that report. And then in the meeting in June, we'd be bringing the Q1 report.
David.
The self-assessment, is the intention that that is sent out separately to members and then brought back in a report? Or do we decide our score at the meeting? And is that something that could be delayed just to help relieve the amount of items you've got?
Thank you, David. We do sometimes carry out that self-assessment exercise offline, actually. So it may, I mean, having a session before or after, if it was quicker, might alleviate some of the agenda space. But yes, it doesn't need to be done in February. It's just about, you know, how heavy the agenda is going to look then afterwards, and whether we just need to.
Well, what we could do is the stuff. Oh, sorry, Rob, you want to come in?
It was on the second point regarding Councillor Kyber's question of Ryan. If Ryan could confirm how we can report on Q4 risk in the middle of Q4, I think that's essentially the question Councillor Kyber was asking, and how you're satisfied that's an appropriate approach rather than dropping it into the first quarter of the following financial year. Can you just clarify why that's okay from your perspective?
Essentially, that's the way we've done it at the moment, because what happens with the way these meetings have dropped is that because if we report at the end of the quarter, we're reporting out stuff which has happened several months ago, and it can tend to be that we're talking about stuff that happened at the start of, for example, Q1. We'll talk about that at the end of Q2, and that situation's changed. So the way we try to change it is that we bring a snapshot of where we are in that quarter at that date and what we see the movement for the rest of the quarter to be. So that's how we'd be doing a Q4 report in February, as opposed to talk about Q4 in June.
In other words, risk is looking forward and performance is looking backwards.
So just on the issue of the self-assessment, I mean, how about if we do send that out to members, and then what we can do is we could have a quick report where we get together a consensus around there, and if the reports have come back the same, then that should mean that you'll have something. We'll have all responded to you before the meeting, and then we can use the meeting to confirm the values. How about that? Right, anything else, members, on the forward work plan? No. So that's the end of item 11. Item 12, next meeting. So we've now agreed and confirmed that that's on the 2nd of February at 10 AM, and we have a full agenda for that meeting. So I look forward to seeing you all then. So with that, I formally close the meeting, and thank you for your attendance. Thank you.
Chairman, I think we should wish everyone